anybody how to do it. So I'm taking on China. The Chinese virus.
China is a very popular target in American politics. Many, many years ago, it was Japan, by the way. If you recall, back in the 80s, Japan played the role. And it does make you think that there's a kind of demonology available for Asian Americans to face in the international arena that has to have a country behind it.
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country.
Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
Asian Americans face the stereotype of being considered foreigners in their own land.
A very deep, heavy, and important message and documentary about race and racism in general. It's definitely a message that needed to be said with today's climate and how people have treated Asian Americans due to the pandemic. And it also covers a very serious underlying issue. I will be delving a little bit into politics, but on the grounds of neutrality, I do want to address the fact that I don't think that every person who voted for former President Donald Trump is racist. Everyone has their own reasons for why they voted for him. However, the actions of using COVID as a scapegoat and pinning it on the Chinese, it created a snowball effect that unfortunately radicalized a not pleasant portion of people. And the issue as well is this isn't a new issue. It's a constant issue, and the only thing that changes is the race that's targeted. Today, it's Asian Americans, but in the past it's been Muslim Americans, Latino Americans, African Americans. It's a problem that, unfortunately, every minority race has dealt with. And I think that the documentary also makes a very important notion that even if you feel like it'll never happen to you, the future can lead to anything. And that's why race is so important, because just because it isn't happening to you today doesn't mean that you won't be discriminated tomorrow. It's better to unite with each other than put yourself in this superior hierarchy, because when they're coming after you, who's going to help, you know? So this was a very important documentary.
It was a really strong piece, obviously really poignant and topical right now. It's kind of telling us about a situation as the situation is still happening, and it's really just terrible. So for that reason alone, I'm glad this one exists. But all in all, they did a really good job at just piecing together different perspectives, some great footage and great interviews that really helped speak to the issue. So it was really, really well structured that way. Just good editing to keep everything at pace and interesting and to inform the audience. Really, yeah, a strong one, worth checking out.
Really comprehensive and thought-provoking documentary with just this incredibly wide array of insights from knowledgeable insiders in politics and media, as well as I loved the diverse mediums of information sources, the old propaganda the newspaper articles, news reports, and footage that honestly made my jaw drop with the overt racism. You have to bring yourself to a point and say, how is this possible? How did we allow these sentiments to pervade? And it's a real reality check for our present when we see this still happening. And just the parallels of the past versus the current racist and aggressive climate. You see that we have made some strides, but this resurgence is almost a direct mirror to the past. And I think pieces like this are so important to give us that check and make sure that we don't let anything go as deeply rooted in hate as it was in the past, because fear and hate are really powerful tools. So yeah, I thought it was a really informative and necessary piece of filmmaking to make at this time. And I hope its message gets spread far and wide.
A really well done piece of filmmaking. You know, the filmmakers did a great job at kind of bringing everything back around. You know, starting like with basically like all of the racism in America from America's beginnings, and then to the coronavirus stuff and Trump and all of the hate crimes and everything that are currently going on. I think that I think it also takes an optimistic note with Judy at the end, and I really liked how they were able to kind of weave this narrative. And I think whenever you're getting into longer forms of documentary, that's important. It's important that like every single beat kind of leads into the next. And I think that the filmmakers did a great job because it just keeps you, trained in and focused and, making those connections that they want you to make mentally. And I think that, I think it's just a really well-made film, and I hope that the filmmakers, this leads to more work for them, and they find an avenue to get this seen.
Really interesting documentary that explored a really important topic that's super timely now in a very interesting way. I liked how it went beyond just having historic content or footage or pieces. But it also brought in a variety of voices from people living through the experience. And I think that is like one of the strongest things about this documentary is having that conversation amongst these different individuals against a bigger context. It was really fascinating and really well done.
It opened my eyes to issues that Asian Americans have historically faced for decades, for centuries in this country that, like, frankly, weren't really taught to me growing up the same way. You know what I'm saying? And so this film was really eye-opening for me, you know what I'm saying? And so I always say the strength of a documentary rises and dies on the subject matter. And like this, eye-opening, like moving, you know what I'm saying? Changed my whole like perspective, you know what I'm saying? And I also like that it ended on like a positive note. Like, hey, we can get there. Like, yes, we can. Like as much as there's decades of like hate and terribleness, we can get better. We can get like the worst thing is to just give up. But like, I like how this documentary didn't just stop with like, yeah, we have centuries of problems and that's it. But I liked how it was like, yeah, but if we keep going, we can maybe get there. You know what I'm saying? So that I like when documentaries don't just lay out the problem, but also end on a more hopeful note. So that's good. That's good filmmaking, I think. So good job.
Important feature documentary, and I feel like it's something that a lot of people need to see and to really sit down and think about what the message is and kind of how that translates to what they do with their usual lives and their daily routines, and kind of open up their eyes to see what exactly is happening around them. Because I know a lot of people get to turn a blind eye and just kind of ignore what's happening and just say, oh, that's not affecting me personally. But in the large scale of things, there are so many things happening. There's so many cases that aren't really being talked about or that isn't covered in the news or anything. So it's documentary films like this that really do bring that message to light and plays as a really great reminder of what we've come from, all the things that people have faced, just BIPOC communities especially, we have faced in the past and where we are now and how we should move on in the future. Especially now in the peak of COVID, the pandemic, BLM, all that, all of those events, this is important for people to really sit back and reflect on what's happening and to really take matters in their own hand and take initiative and educate themselves more. Because I feel like a lot of people just ignore that this has been something in the making for decades. But yeah, I mean, in terms of documentary style, this was really great. I like that there was a really balanced mix of archival footage and interviews and from so many different perspectives too. The fact that it talked about politicians and educators and any occupation really. So it was very enlightening to see everyone talk about it and their experiences. So yeah, I think this was done really well. It was really well edited, put together. Again, lots of footage that I personally haven't seen before in other documentaries. So really great job with putting everything together. And again, hopefully more people get to see this, educate themselves, and take initiative. So thanks again for doing
this. This was such a great film. And I think that stories like this, films like this, it's wonderful that they're being made more these days and that they're getting more exposure and that these stories are getting told and it's in the media now and it's being brought to light more and more as it should be. They highlighted a lot of really fantastic things in this. They approached this concept not even from one or two directions, but they really looked at it in a lot of different ways. They looked at it politically, they looked at it historically, they looked at it in comparison to other racial injustices that have happened in America especially. And so they really did look at it from so many different angles and so many different points of view that it felt really not just educational, but it felt really thorough. And you know, seeing some of the, especially the historical images and things that have happened over the last year or so with COVID is almost like it's hard to watch, it's hard to stomach, but it's the type of thing that you need to see, you need to be aware of. You can't just have your head in the sand and pretend it doesn't happen just because it might not be happening to you. And I think, like I said, films like this, stories like this, the more they're told, the more change can come about. And it was highlighted a bunch of different ways that when things start to change, the force for change is always going to butt up against the force that doesn't want to change until, you know, something gives way. And I think getting these stories out is so important, and getting points of view out like this is so important, of really looking at how deep and really just thorough the racial injustices are in America, and also highlighting the hope of like having little kids be like, that person looks like me, and having representation, and how things are still starting to change, already starting to change. There are, you know, more people in political positions, more people in all these different positions that are visible that than there were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that I think they did a good job balancing what needs to happen, why it needs to change, what really is going on with, look at how much progress we are making. Let's continue this. Let's build on this momentum. We still have a long way to go. I thought it was really well balanced between those two kind of concepts.